It's the end of January, which means only one thing in football. It's deadline day. I'm Samantha Johnson, and this is Beyond the Game. Yes, we delve into the phenomenal world of deadline day, what makes it tick, how the deals are done, and what's been spent.
I'm Lance Santos and we're at Arsenal's home ground, the Emirates, and we've been all around London and beyond to show you exactly what goes on behind the scenes of the January transfer window.
Now, it might not be as big as the summer transfer window, but there's always plenty to talk about when it comes to January. And transfer deadline day is no different in 2017. Not only will we take a look at some of the hits and misses of transfer days gone by, but we'll also take you behind the rumours and spin of deadline day. So with no further ado, here's Lance Santos, who's been travelling around the UK getting a feel of the transfer buzz.
Well, January in London, it's constantly raining and the mood is pretty grim. Now, on this walk to stadiums for football fans, the outlook could get a lot worse. We're halfway through the season and teams languishing at the bottom of the English Premier League, fighting for survival.
We help City to remain in Premier League. And this is our objective.
But now January represents a chance, well, a bit of optimism, if you like. That chance to buy a new player, to add to your squad, get a defender to stop the rot, sign that Colombian midfielder who's going to score a few goals, maybe get you 6-9 points, keep you up in the most lucrative league in the world.
I'm not sure because some of the guys he's Marco Silva's bringing in, I've never heard of.
And it can obviously go wrong as well, can't it, January?
We can do. We could have some right lemons come in, you don't know.
Teams like Hull dropping down from the English Premier League, well, there's no guarantee that they'll come back anytime soon, if at all. It is a waste of millions of dollars in TV revenue, ad sponsorships, your players leave. It is horrible. For sides like Fulham in the Championship here, well, there's a certain sense of real positivity around because they could make the playoffs. They could be going up into the English Premier League. Now, that is what the January transfer window is all about. It opens up the chance to sign a few players.
Forward, maybe a centre-half, just to strengthen the squad, so fingers crossed.
Where do you need strength at the moment?
Everywhere. Look what they are in the league, mate.
Who would you take?
Messi,
Why?
Messi.
because he's really good.
And you think chance of Messi coming this January transfer window to Hull?
No.
Spend 15 million on a player, is it worth it? You betcha. If you can go up into the English Premier League, or for sides like Hull, if you can stay in the Premier League. So it's all about signing, making that crucial signing to keep you afloat, but it doesn't always turn out very well. You could sign someone who turns out to be terrible. You could sign someone who saves your season. So the next few days are absolutely crucial. But let's remind you of a few of the tops and flops of the January transfer window.
Probably the greatest January transfer of all time has to be Luis Suarez. The Reds picked up the Uruguayan forward for 27 million from Ajax. He bagged 31 goals and 21 assists in a single season, only to be pipped to the title by Manchester City. After a few seasons at Anfield, Suarez was sold to Barcelona for $87 million. But for every winner, there is a loser. Goal machine Luis Suarez was brought in to replace COP favourite Fernando Torres. The Spaniard's record-breaking $62 million deal to Chelsea sent shockwaves through the Premier League. But in the end, they proved to be nothing more than ripples. Torres scored just once in his first 18 games, and he only managed 19 more in his next 92 appearances. But January transfers can be hit or miss at the best of times, and Liverpool know that all too well. The Reds brought in Andy Carroll for $43 million to replace Torres. Even at the time, that was way too much to pay for a striker who spent more time in the treatment room than on the pitch. The England striker scored just 2 goals in his first season, and things didn't get any better. The following year, Carroll bagged 4 goals in 35 games. He was offloaded to West Ham for $5 million. That's a $38 million loss, if you're wondering. And here's a stateside deal breaker. Clint Dempsey became the most expensive transfer from the MLS. The American joined strugglers Fulham from New England Revolution. His first goal was a winning one against Liverpool, and it meant that the Londoners avoided relegation. Dempsey stayed at Fulham for another 5 seasons and scored a winner against Juventus in the Europa League, ensuring his place as a club legend.
Clocks, clicks and computers. As Father Time draws closer to the transfer deadline, the need for information intensifies. Where will he go? Who's got that kind of cash to pay, and is even worth that? The January transfer window sends the internet into meltdown and the rumour mill is rife. So how do you know what to believe? We think we found the answer. Here's Lance Santos.
In the glamorous world of football transfers, you tend to think fast cars, bags of money and outrageous contract demands. You won't find any of that here. Instead, the glitz and glamour has been replaced by keyboards, mathematics and computer science.
If you're investing 30, 40 million pound into a player, you want to be as close to guaranteed of a success as you can. So I think more and more analysis and more stats and, like you say, computer science and data is going to be used by not only the clubs, but I think obviously that then sort of trickles down into the industry as a whole.
Football Whispers, based in the UK city of Milton Keynes, is a website becoming one of the most reliable places to find out the likelihood of your club signing that new player, helping you sort fact from fiction in a world of fake news.
So we're able to take millions and millions of conversations from across the world and trying to work out which player is moving to which location based on the volume of conversations. So somebody like Henry Winter from The Times talking about a particular football event carries far more gravitas than say, myself tweeting from my bedroom.
Like midfielders trekking the muddy pitches of the lower leagues, the players here mine data, and lots of it. They trawl their way through everything from the best journalists in football all the way through to the blokes writing blogs in their bedroom.
You get an extra point because you get the position right.
Every rumour is detailed, analysed and given a reliability score. That way you know exactly how likely a deal is to happen.
Because we, as we say, our whole pretense is to try and decipher the fact from fiction for people and give some reliability. But at the same time, people want a little bit of fantasy, so they do want to see, you know, the rogue rumour that Messi's landed at Manchester Airport and maybe about to sign for Manchester City. So there's always those things that you're never going to get away from on deadline day, and I think it's become more of a form of infotainment or entertainment in the last few years.
A year ago, Football Whispers website was born and run by a handful of freelancers who were keen on the idea of marrying big football news and big data. 12 months down the line, and there's a team of writers across the world. There's full-time editors, and there's even their own TV weekly studio show.
2 shows today as we count down to the end of the transfer window. Joining us on the sofa, John Smith, the original super agent.
In an age where clubs are spending millions of dollars on potential prospects, fans want to know everything about the guy they're about to sign, and they want it now.
I'm ready now.
Gone are the days of just watching a presenter in a yellow tie read you the news. The way we consume sport is changing all around the world, and Football Whispers are at the very forefront of combining mathematics to create a new age formula for an age-old game.
So millions of people across the world will be clicking on websites just like those to find out exactly where the players are going. And for more, I'm joined by Darren Lewis, a British football writer. Darren, you said it's been a relatively quiet window so far, but there's still time to come. And if so, where do you think the moves are going to happen later on?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. It has been a quiet transfer deadline day. We've seen big, explosive deadline days in the past. Andy Carroll for moving for a British record fee. Fernando Torres going to Chelsea for £50 million. By comparison, this one is as quiet as a dormouse.
We won't see any huge deals like that.
I would be very, very surprised. Obviously, in football, you can never say never, but I would be very, very surprised if we were to see a big deal tonight. I think we're more likely to see action at the bottom end of the Premier League. Sam Allardyce at Crystal Palace trying to get in a midfielder for £13 million from Olympiacos. He's already signed Patrick Van Aanholt from Sunderland for £14 million, and he may well try and see if he could get a striker in as well. But before the deadline, I think it'll be at the bottom end of the Premier League where we'll see most action.
Well, Big Sam desperate for a win, of course, desperate to bring Palace out of trouble there, and that's where we expected most of the deals, he said as many as 6.
Yes.
Do you suspect it will be as many as 6?
Yeah, he's looking at central defenders as well. I know that he's had a look at another midfield. As I say, we know about Milicevic, but also, you know, in terms of Sam Allardyce, he knows that the squad he has at the moment is unbalanced. It's not good enough to compete in the Premier League. I know he's looked at Kara Mboji from Anderlecht, a central defender who's been courted by a number of clubs. Also Serdar Tachi, who plays for Spartak Moscow. He's interesting a lot of clubs at the bottom end of the Premier League. I think as far as Allardyce is concerned, however, there has been this concern over the timing of the Premier League
said
games.
That some of his players on the bench might be wondering if they're out the door, given that they have a fixture this evening and a few hours to go. Does he have a point?
He does have a very good point. I think in terms of the timing of these fixtures tonight, we're here at Arsenal ahead of their game against Watford. There are still players who are unaware of their futures. I think there could have been some cooperation with the Premier League to maybe shift today's transfer deadline 24, even 48 hours, because I think to have an evening like this where lots of players around the country are unsure of what's going to happen ahead of the deadline tonight is, you could call it a farce.
Well, Big Sam's certainly going to be very busy, of course, tonight. And then I want to talk to you about, we are at the Emirates, of course, Arsenal up against Watford. They're keeping the pressure on Chelsea. Now, that's where we want to look tonight, because Chelsea take on Liverpool. It's early days still, well, it's halfway through the season, but this will go a long way to defining the Premier League season, won't it?
I think you're absolutely right. Chelsea at the moment 8 points clear of the chasing pack at the top of the Premier League, but Arsenal in form, and this time last year, they led the Premier League turning for home at the start of January, and then they managed to win 2 out of their subsequent 8. This time around, they're undefeated this month in the Premier League, and I think as far as Arsene Wenger is concerned, he's been very honest, open, and quite bullish, actually. He says he's got the best stable of strikers he's had in his time at the Emirates. Now, for my money, I think when you look at the likes of Bergkamp and Henry, there have been better, but it's a sign of his confidence that he's spoken so highly of the players that he's got at his disposal. I think they will win tonight, and I think Saturday's game against Chelsea is key. If they can take 3 points off Chelsea then, and certainly if Liverpool were to beat them tonight, it could be anybody's game. I think there is a long way to go, as you say.
Well, absolutely, a long way to go, and still time to go, of course, on deadline day. So maybe Big Sam will bring in a few more players, and maybe we'll see some bigger name signings or more action at the lower end of the table.
Maybe indeed. Now, as we mentioned at the top of the show, it might not be summer, but that doesn't mean that this winter transfer window doesn't attract a lot of attention and a lot of cold, hard cash. You only need to take a look at the last few years of spending in the English Premier League to see that.
For the past few years, transfer spending in the English Premier League has hit new heights. We're now at a point where we more often talk in billions rather than millions, even when it comes to the January transfer window. Over the past 10 years, more than $1.5 billion has been spent in the mid-season rush for players, but the cash really began to flow from 2010 onwards, along with some big-name players. Torres made headlines in the 2010 season with his $60 million January move to Chelsea, in a period that saw clubs spend just under $300 million. The following season may be the cheapest in recent memory, but even then, $75 million was spent. Belgian hotshot Kevin De Bruyne arrived at Chelsea and began to leave his mark on the Premier League. $8 million seems like an absolute bargain by now. January 2013 saw Daniel Sturridge change the blue shirt of Stamford Bridge to the crimson red of Anfield. At $15 million, he was responsible for 10% of the January total spend. Chelsea were again involved in one of the biggest deals a year later, which saw Juan Mata head over to Old Trafford for a massive $45 million during a transfer window that saw $160 million of cash thrown about. But it didn't take long for the Blues to swap one Juan for another, this time in the form of Juan Cuadrado. For just under $30 million, he didn't quite live up to the price tag. And then this time last year, we saw the bill top $200 million for only the second time. It was also the first real foray into the English League by the Chinese, with Chelsea's Ramirez setting sail for Jiangsu for a cool $30 million. China may have dominated most of the headlines so far this January, but there's still enough time for the world's biggest clubs to flash their cash in a bid for a mid-season boost.
Now, when it comes to transfers, there's often a lot of smoke and mirrors, big headline figures and names being splashed all over the papers, with a lot of deals being done behind closed doors. But wherever there's a transfer, one thing you're guaranteed to find is an agent. So we spent some time with James Featherstone, an agent based in the UK, as he prepared for the January deadline.
You know, we can pass on that information.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
Take that, mate, no worries.
Hi, mate.
Hi, Val. What sort of money are we looking at regarding...
For me, it was a winding path, but quite straightforward. If I play professionally, had a bad injury, which finished my career prematurely at a young age. And really, it was those friends. They had bad experiences with advice and representation, and they approached me and asked me if I'd look after them. And James Beattie there, pictured in his Stoke kit. You know, we were apprentices together at Blackburn Rovers, so I think I actually cleaned his boots when he became pro, because he's a little bit older than me. As I say, I went off into investment banking. He went off and played for England and scored nearly 100 Premier League goals.
Obviously, with the window open, I've been in the office, you know, I was in the office Sunday and things like that, but if you can do, sometimes in a 2-hour car journey, you can do as much as you can as, you know, 4 or 5 hours sat at the desk.
All right, Sam. Not bad, mate, you? I can tell you now, I make and receive on average 70 calls a day, and that's both inside and outside of the window. So it makes for a very, very busy time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, mate, it's a bit of a last-minute one. So he's on £7 grand a week at the moment. So obviously they'd love full recovery, but if it was if it was an offer of something against that, mate, I'd be happy to take it to the chief exec and see what he said.
You know, it's so easy to be the guy that's there on deadline day when the cameras are there and the club wants you and the multi-million-pound contracts on the table and the pens out and the shirt and the suit and the ties on. For me, that's the simple bit. I think the real difficult bit is being there, 11 o'clock at night, midnight, round the house, or with wives, girlfriends, parents. For me, that's the sign of a good agent.
It's not a bad shot, mate. Picture of me on the wall there.
Quite often you might have their heads up on something, think it's not going to happen, and then, you know, within the last day or couple of days, you've got a job to do and you've got to deliver for your client.
He seemed keen about it, and he said, yeah, fine, no problem.
I'd love to say that the clubs and everybody involved is so strategic that they would rather do nothing than just do something for the sake of it. I think it'd be a little bit naive to say that outright. I remember leaving Blackpool when they were in the Premier League, leaving at 11:10, thinking the deal's done, get 25 minutes down the motorway, have to do a U-turn to go back to sign some further paperwork. Thankfully, the deal sheet had been submitted, so it got over the line.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even rule out.
You know, reputation and credibility takes forever to build up. We're continually improving that every single day. But it can take one phone call or one deal or one interaction for it to disappear.
You've got to manage the lad, do you know what I mean? So it's better for you to, when they pull him and say, listen, this is, you know...
I had a situation recently, actually. We took a player earning a normal amount of money to a life-changing amount of money. And to see his mum in tears, to see his dreams becoming reality, to him making his debut the following Saturday, changing the game, man of the match performance. You know, that's hairs on the back of the neck moment, you know. And I think, you know, I went home after seeing his mum and his family that have all poured so much effort into his career. For me, that was okay, this is why I do it.
It's time to have a look at the deals that are signed, sealed and delivered around the world. And we're starting local in Istanbul, where it is official, folks. Emmanuel Adebayor has signed for Medipol Başakşehir on a free. Heading over to the Bundesliga, and 19-year-old Jamaican whiz kid Leon Bailey has signed for a 5-year deal at Bayer Leverkusen for $14 million from Genk. And in the latest major acquisition in the Chinese Super League, the Brazilian forward Pato has completed his move to Tianjin for $19 million. From the Chinese Super League and back to the Turkish Super League, where Demba Ba has officially returned to Besiktas on loan from Shanghai Shenhua until the end of the season. Which moves us nicely onto the rest of the Turkish transfers, or rather lack of. Istanbul giants Fenerbahce, Galatasaray and Besiktas are all under financial monitoring by UEFA, and they have to comply with financial fair play terms. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at the top 4 teams in the Turkish Super League and their winter transfers, starting with the champions Besiktas, who have signed Croatian defender Matej Mitrovic for $4.5 million, the most expensive deal in the window. Galatasaray have strengthened their squad with Gary Rodriguez from PAOK and Ahmet Çalık from Gençlerbirliği with a total of $6.4 million coming out of their pockets. Now, Medipol Başakşehir, who are currently second in the league, have signed 4 players, including Schalke's Kayseri and Gençlerbirliği's İrfan Kahveci. And the rest of the deals are either on a free or on loan. The biggest surprise on the list, as I mentioned before, is Emmanuel Adebayor's move to Başakşehir. Besiktas have brought back their former players Demba Ba and Ersan on loan from China. And 4th place, Fenerbahce have only made 1 signing in this window, Karakev from Shakhtar. I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by someone who's been working very hard in this year's transfer window, Mr. Semih Usta. Thank you for taking the time out for joining us.
Hello, Samantha.
Now, before we talk generally about the transfer in Turkey, you've been working very hard with Adebayor, bringing him back to Turkey. Just tell us how that came about.
Adebayor is a great player with huge career, and but he hadn't been playing since the end of last season. Although free players are very tempting for the clubs, on this one they had to be careful. And Başakşehir is the only club from the Turkish Super League, as far as I know, to send a scout to Africa Cup of Nations. And their scout Saidu was there following all the games. And Adebayor played all 3 games, 90 minutes. And physically, when he's convinced that the player is in a good state, the deal was pretty much up to me to finalize.
So he's ready, he's fit, and he's ready to fight for the club.
Exactly. I think Başakşehir gave him the opportunity to bring back on the stage what Adebayor really is. And this is his only chance, and I think he'll take it.
Okay, well, let's talk about the transfers in Turkey. The political and economic climate here in the country has suffered over the past few months, especially with the lira, for example, which dropped by a quarter of its value in the last 18 months. How has it affected business for you in terms of bringing players to the country?
In my opinion, the currency changes didn't affect at all. This is my opinion, because all the revenues received by the clubs and with the new TV signings, it's all in foreign currency anyway. So for that sense, it went in the same parallel. Their revenues increased, and then obviously spendings are increased. But I can say that their payrolls, if you compare to Turkish lira, must have increased by 20-30%, which is really bad.
Okay, so well, when it comes to that, that's the economic side, but what about the other side, the political side, the safety issues? I mean, did you have a hard time convincing some players to come to the country?
To be honest, of course, they always had this at the back of their mind. When you first call them, talk about Istanbul, Turkey, or other cities, they always a bit reluctant to say yes initially. But afterwards, when they speak to other players who are playing in Turkey, and there are many good players already in the Super League, I think they feel a bit more convinced. And well, if you're offering them also good salaries, I think they put this in the 2nd or 3rd priority.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Chinese Super League. It's been attracting a lot of the big names to their leagues. Has that affected, the business in Turkey?
It I think more affected the business in Europe in general, because you would get the bigger players and bigger signing fees and compensations, especially from Premier League or Italy or France, than to China, than Turkey. So in that sense, I think it didn't have much of an effect in Turkey.
Okay, Sammy, thank you very much. I know you're still busy,
very
so
much.
I'll set you free. That's it for this special deadline day edition of Beyond the Game. I hope you got the players you wanted. If not, there's always the summer. Thanks for watching. Bye.